This is often a very difficult thing for students to decide is where am I going to apply? Hi, Camille.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Fine, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. It's great to see you. Where are you calling from?
I am actually based in London, England right now.
Oh, wow. Is that in
It's
the U.S.? No, I'm kidding.
so we unfortunately just went to, or good on a public health standpoint, to go into lockdown, but
Yeah.
not a good thing in terms of cases. So
Yeah.
yeah, just sitting in my apartment,
Yeah. How long have you been in London?
Just a couple of months.
Hmm.
I've been kind of living in a couple of places over the past 2 years. So so my parents live in England, so
Oh, okay.
just decided to make it back this way. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. That's incredible. Well, enjoy your time there, and we'll get on with our goals for tonight. And but thank you for joining us on Am I Ready? This is going to be exciting. We'll answer some questions, and certainly want to answer your any questions that you have, any concerns or whatever, and just get to the bottom of things and try to make some conclusions.
Awesome. Thank you
Sound
so
good?
much.
Yeah, good. So
Perfect.
let's go to your map to dashboard. Here we go. And since we have some people who are listening on a podcast to this, I'll describe as much of this as we can. So why don't you, Camille, kind of take us through the GPA graph that we see here in front of us? Tell us a little bit about what we're seeing here, and where you went to school, what was your major, and kind of a little bit of the story that we see here presented to us graphically.
Sure, sure. So I actually started off at Tulane University in New Orleans, where I was studying public health. And then I transferred to Georgetown to be closer to my grandparents who were living up there. And I was majoring in sociology and minoring in biology because they didn't have a public health major. So that was kind of my combination of the two.
Mhm.
But transferring was a little tricky for me. And so you can kind of see I had a bit of a dip my sophomore fall in my GPA. Unfortunately, I got ill and the transfer was hard. And so it was not one of my better semesters.
Yeah.
But from there, I kind of was able to kind of find my spot. I studied abroad, and those classes aren't shown in my GPA since they weren't calculated in my undergrad GPA. But that was
Right.
something I wanted to ask you if I needed to include or not. And then after I graduated, I actually went and did a master's program in Ireland, which is also not included. But in between these years, I was taking summer courses, and my prereqs are reflected in this graph.
Okay, good. So basically, what we see here in terms of the graph is what we're seeing is a cumulative 374, science 363, and a trend line that is pretty is very stable. Which the trend line I'm particularly looking at is the blue line, which is the cumulative, which really shows a good degree of stability. The semester by semester obviously is going to go up and down a little bit, depending on grades and things like that, but largely is in the area of the 3.5 or better kind of a zone, I guess you'd say. And then the trend line that I do find here interesting, that's encouraging, is the science GPA trend line. So what we have here is a science GPA that started off really low, largely because you probably weren't taking a whole lot of hard sciences at that point, and so it's only a few hours, but it's definitely a good-looking trend line that goes from 3-ish, 3.2-ish, all the way up to now 3.6. So that's very encouraging. And am I right in sort of assuming that some of that is because of how many science courses you were taking in a given semester, depending on, obviously with a bio minor, you're not taking like tons of sciences, but you're taking some, and probably that's where most of your prereqs came from, was as a part of that minor that you were doing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I figured out a little bit later in my college journey that I was going to go specifically towards medicine. So I think that's when I kind of upped those science courses towards the end, and fitting in those prerequisites.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to me, what we have here is it seems like you're a good student. Now, your master's degree from Ireland, what is that in?
So it's in global health. So I also wasn't really sure, because in Ireland, they don't do grades. So, luckily, I got a first honor distinction, but what that translates to in terms of grades, I wasn't exactly sure. So it was a 1-year master's program, but it was a master's of science, but it wasn't those like microbiology courses and things like that.
Right.
So I know that medical schools don't care as much about those types of master's programs, but I also, just in terms of it being a European degree, wasn't sure how it applied.
Well, I think it's not going to really apply when we're talking about it quantitatively. Now, when we're talking about it qualitatively, yes, it's going to have an impact. They're going to see that you have a master's degree. They're going to see it's in global health. My assumption is, based on what you said about your major early on at Tulane, and then now with this global health master's degree, this is a real passion area for you. Is that correct?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So so qualitatively, yeah, absolutely. They're going to see that. That's going to be meaningful to them. It's going to fit into your bigger picture, the bigger story of Camille, and why you're wanting to go into medicine, and what you envision medicine to be for you, and what that's going to look like in your career. And so I would say definitely don't feel like that the time you spent in Ireland doing the master's program is lost on medical schools. It's not going to be lost on medical schools. It's not going to be calculated into the GPA, obviously, but it is going to be meaningful. So, don't really key here is to not feel like, well, this doesn't impact it at all, because it will.
Okay. Sure. Whew. Glad that year counts.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So let's go over to in terms of your the map dashboard. If we go down to the MCAT and look at that.
Oh, so MCAT is my one thing that I don't have right now.
Okay. So let's talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I finally finished in December all of my prereqs and everything, and I just finished my job in order to kind of focus solely on the MCAT for this spring. So my hope is to take the MCAT in like April of this year, so that I would dedicate the next 3.5 months purely to MCAT studying. Luckily I was able to save, so I can kind of just be focusing on that for the next couple of months. But I'm not sure if that sounds like enough time to do.
Well, I think it's different for different students. I think basically you're looking at, you've got about, if you want to take it in April or May, you've got essentially 4 months to really focus in. If that's all you're doing, I think that's plenty of time. And it sounds like you're fairly close to some of these courses. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah.
So that's a good thing as well. So content wise, you're still got a lot of this fresh in your mind. And so I think that's how I think that sounds like enough time. I would say just keep the focus that you're going to be able to show to the MCAT over the next 4 or 5 months is going to be crucial. Having a good study plan. Now how are you going to be studying for the MCAT?
So I'm planning on doing the Blueprint course, the online course, just because, especially with my time difference, it's a little difficult to do like a live class.
Right.
So the online kind of self-paced thing,
Right.
I was thinking that that would probably be the best way to do it, especially since I'm not with anybody else that I can study with. So that was kind of my plan. And then I also have the Kaplan books to supplement if I need to.
Right.
So yeah, and then try to do as many full
Yeah.
length exams as I can.
Yeah, really, that's the key is, a good diagnostic at the beginning, to kind of get your bearings, and then just, hitting the books and as many uh, practice tests as possible throughout the course of the spring. And my encouragement always is to try to learn from the questions that you get wrong, and that's the real benefit of some of these online resources is that they'll guide you to understanding why did you get this wrong. Where did you go? Where did you go awry in your analysis of the question, or where were you wrong with regard to content, or did you misread the question, or whatever. But I'm even of the mind often that it's equally as important to get to know why you got an answer correct. It is very possible for us to get a correct answer using wrong methodology. And so I think it's very beneficial to often understanding why did you get a question correct, and that can sometimes uncover hidden little inaccuracies that we have with regard to our thought processes and stuff like that. So I definitely encourage you to. I think you got a good plan in mind for the MCAT. You should have plenty of times that you're devoting, pretty much full time to the effort. So I would say that sounds like a good plan to me.
Okay,
Definitely.
good. Yeah, because I think the course also was appealing to me since obviously I'm out of undergrad at this point. I don't
Right.
necessarily have an advisor or these study groups or anything like that. So I was
Right.
thinking that taking a course could kind of be a good structure
Yeah.
for me since
Yeah, I
I'm not
agree with that.
an undergrad anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that sounds very wise. Okay, back to the the dashboard. We'll go up to the activities tab, and yeah, let's look at that. So why don't you describe to us? So it looks like you've got 3,458 activity hours spread amongst a variety of different things. If you can go to the tab setting over on the left, activities, and let's just kind of look at the things that you've been doing, and you'll kind of and my guess is that a lot of these are going to be public health kinds of things that you've been involved in. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, definitely. I think, for me, I've always been involved with something that has to do with HIV. And so that was really big for me in my undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a HIV tester and a fellow with this group called 110 Health. And we would bring free HIV testing into low income neighborhoods in DC. I had a family member who was impacted by HIV, and my master's research was all focused around HIV as well. So, and it's for me, that's, a disease that has so many social problems as well as medical. And so it's always been an interesting combination.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that, specifically, would you see that as kind of one of your concentration or an area that you would definitely want to pursue in medical school and in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, infectious diseases has always been really interesting to me, because I do think that there is a very fascinating social aspect to it all, and human behavior, and that impacts the disease just as much as the biology in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's always been kind of really interesting to me, and especially just, in the context that we are right now.
Right.
We can see how, global health is just like, it's so important, and how diseases, they don't care about borders or boundaries, and how do you work within different cultures and different communities to kind of tackle something that might be the same in terms of, HIV or coronavirus, but you have to handle it so differently in so many different places.
Right.
So I think that whole concept to me is really fascinating. And I really think the direction that the world is going. And so to kind of have that awareness and just to be able to kind of learn from those different types of people and cultures, I think is absolutely critical in kind of getting ahead of things like coronavirus.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I'd like to ask you about is the Carbon Health medical intake. You've got that listed as 180 hours, but you have it listed as not medical or clinical, paid employment, not medical, clinical. What were you doing in that particular thing?
Yeah, so that I was working as a short-term contract this fall. And I was in their part of their COVID Ready program. And so, although I have my EMT license, they were only hiring on MAs. And so, they offered me to be part of basically for medical intake. I would list all the patient's symptoms, any of their contacts, depending on the environment, we would take temperatures because if we were outside, it didn't really work as well. But yeah, so we would kind of go around to different groups and organizations, different neighborhoods, but it was all part of a COVID testing program.
Okay. So the question I have, I guess, is you've listed it as not medical or clinical. That sounds somewhat medical to me.
Okay. I guess I was thinking more that like, since I wasn't the one actually administering the test but yeah. I guess that was kind of my thought process.
Yeah, I would say, broaden that a little bit in terms of your, that you were dealing with patients. You were talking to patients as they came in, intake kinds of stuff. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah, then I would definitely list that as medical or clinical experience. Definitely think just because you weren't the actual person taking their temperature or whatever, it sounds like you did that on occasion and stuff, but you were in the process of dealing with patients as they came into the clinic, and so I would see that as clinical.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like you've got a lot of good experiences, EMT for good amount of hours, several years ago, I guess a couple of years ago, 1 year ago. And that must have been a totally different sort of experience for you outside of, being an EMT. Now, were you on transportation, or what exactly were you doing as an EMT?
Yeah, so I got my EMT license and wanted to find a good place to volunteer. I was still in undergrad when I was working at the fire station. And so this was about like 20 minutes outside of DC in Georgetown. But yeah, we had an ambulance service, and I would assess and treat patients for a variety of different issues. And in all honesty, at this point, I was actually considering potentially PA school. And PA school really emphasizes those clinical hours.
Right.
And so I just thought, okay, let me get out there, see if I like the hands-on work, because I knew I was interested in medicine at that point. I was interested in the public health and the global health.
Right.
But I wasn't sure to what extent I liked the hands-on.
Right.
And being an EMT was absolutely amazing, and I loved it. It was so cool. I just learned like rapid fire so much.
Right.
And I think it really helped me to obviously every healthcare profession has its role and an integral part. But I think it kind of it ignited this excitement in me that I wanted to do everything that I could for my patients. And, there was almost like a little bit of frustration or sadness when I would drop off patients at the hospital and I wouldn't be able to see what happened on the other end. And so I started to kind of have this like growing appreciation and just like desire to be that person that could, really do everything for my patient and have all that information, because sometimes we would get cases and I just, it was beyond our scope, and it wasn't something that we could necessarily help with, and we just had to stabilize and transport. And so I think honestly, during that experience, I realized that, I loved the hands-on. I knew that I wanted to be doing something clinical within global health. That I figured that probably going the doctor route was probably the best way for me to
Yeah,
kind of
sure.
do as much as I really wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes total sense to me. Yeah, and I think that, I give you a lot of credit for getting your feet wet in some of these areas to test out, what is it that I'm really wanting to do? Where do my passions lie, and where is this what role in the healthcare system is really going to ignite me and help me feel like I'm having the kind of impact that I want to have. Those are the questions that you should be asking, the questions it sounds like you have been asking, and so that's really great. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think I definitely used to kind of get in my head a little bit that like I wasn't that person that like was born wanting to be a doctor or knew
Right.
all along.
Right.
And it's a very genuine, but it's been a gradual process. And I think for me, now like several years having been like, okay, I'm sure this is my right path, but I think just having taken that time to honestly explore all those other options made my choice to follow, the path to being a physician, like
Yeah.
made it feel really right. And I think I might have been a little maybe uncertain if I hadn't explored other
Right.
things at the same
Right.
time.
Right. Good. 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 If you want to scroll down there a little bit more, and
Let's
let's look at
see.
a lot of things relative to public health. Again, things like the COVID volunteer, while
Mhm.
more specifically related to the acute issues related to COVID and stuff, but definitely fits within the context of, as you mentioned earlier, of sort of the realities of public health, and kind of what's happening in our current world. So that's awesome. Good. And there's a little bit more on page 2, I guess.
Let's see.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really want to point out too is students often ask. So you've got listed on here, you're a member of the running club, you did triathlons, or maybe you're training for a triathlon now. Is that more accurate?
Yeah, I try to pick like 2 a year to
Yeah.
do,
Oh,
just to get
awesome.
myself to do something, because then it rotates up my workouts. It keeps me focused for my studies. So,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
yeah, it's just a fun hobby for me that I enjoy doing.
Oh, yeah, and a lot of times students will ask, "Well, do I really put that on there, or what difference does it make, or what should I include and not include?" And I think this type of stuff, the running stuff that you've done a lot, the triathlons, these are what makes you a three-dimensional person in my view. You put that on your application to show that you have interests, that you're an interesting person, that you've got passions that lie outside of medicine, that you're going to have a full life, and that you're disciplined. Particularly with the triathlon training. I mean, this takes a lot of discipline and a lot of motivation, and so that really shows a lot about your personality, that you're willing to commit to something that takes a lot of prep and has a lot of implications in your life in terms of time commitments and stuff like that. So definitely those are things that you want to include in your application to show those other qualities that are nonetheless still important for physicians. And my guess is that you probably find some level of stress relief from
Definitely.
running, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Just put on the music and you just let everything kind of melt away for an hour. And, for me at least, find that I come back, especially with the grind of being a pre-med, come back and I'm 10 times more refreshed if I,
Yeah.
if I get some energy out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's really great. Yeah, you've got some publications here. You've got some research experience, poster presentation. So this is all really great. The I think you've got a great sort of variety of things with both clinical experience as well as volunteer type things. Definitely stuff that's going to be well received, I think, by an admissions committee, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. You're not seeing any massive gaps that you think that
Not really at all. I mean, I think that it, what it seems like when I look at your stuff is that you're definitely not the person who's just checking off boxes. And well, I did clinical, check box. I did some research, check that box. I did some this, check that box. And that's not what comes across from what I see here at all. And that's the kind of stuff that admissions committees want to see. They want to see people who are doing things because they're passionate about them, because they care about them, because it fits within the bigger picture of what they're trying to do medicine for. And so that's kind of the feeling that I get from what you're doing, is that you're not doing stuff just to check off boxes.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, a lot of the medical schools that I'm looking at are ones that I know have like global health centers or programs or kind of like a strong focus on that type of stuff. So that's been helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of medical schools, why don't we look? Have you got some med schools in MAP that you've been looking at?
I do, probably too many right now. But I gotta do some more deep dive research, which I think is going to be kind of my the other half of my day when I'm taking a break from MCAT studying is kind of like really doing deep dives into seeing the missions and the fits of these schools for me. So these ones are kind of a little bit more off the bat, like it looked like some things that I would really enjoy. But
and it makes sense to me that you would look at medical schools that have a global kind of a global health perspective, or that's part of their mission, or what they're really seeking to do within the context of their curriculum and stuff like that. So that I think what that does is it says that you're being thoughtful about this process, that you're really looking at schools that really fit with what your goals are. And not just, I want to live in Boston, so I'll apply to BU, or, stuff like that. Nothing wrong to, choose a school because you think it'd be cool to live there. But I do think that the broader perspective of really finding schools that kind of fit your own personal life mission is the better way to make those choices. So, yeah. So how many schools do you have listed on here so far?
So there's 28 listed. But yeah, I'd say maybe like half of them are kind of global health centered, and then the other half were just other qualities that I really appreciated in them in terms of like the populations they were trying to serve, or I did a big research thesis for my master's, and I really enjoyed that as well. So, I also liked schools that had a focus on that too.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. And that's becoming more and more of a trend as medical schools evaluate their curricula and decide what they want to do. Having even entire years of their curriculum that are devoted to research, or to public health efforts, or to other, master, combined MD master's programs. A lot of this kind of stuff is very much more common now than it used to be. And I think, looking at schools that have that kind of energy that really matches with what you're trying to do, I think that's a great idea. Now I see that you've got a few DO schools on here. Is that so you're kind of thinking of applying, both ways?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I like from listening to Dr. Gray's podcast too, like it doesn't really sound like there's a big difference. Like, again, I kind of came into this whole process a little bit later without advisors in terms of making this decision. So, obviously I understand the schooling differences, but in terms of practicing, so yeah, I'm very open to it. I think it's both are great to me.
Yeah, yeah. The only caveat I would give to that is that there are countries, particularly since you're interested in global health, there are countries where osteopathic medicine is not recognized, and that is changing gradually as countries become other countries become more familiar with what osteopathic medicine is all about. But just be aware of that. I would say,
That's
you
good to
know, put it in the back of your mind as just a a small issue. I don't think it's a big issue. But keep in mind that depending on globally, what your goals are, that could impact it. Although I think the chances are probably not, pretty low that they would impact it at any significant level. But just kind of just to be aware of.
Okay. On that note, I lived in Ireland and I liked that. I like being international if possible. Like, would you suggest against potentially like applying to the Royal College of Surgeons, for example, in Dublin? Like, what's your take on going to international medical schools?
Well, I think, for people in the U.S., most people in the U.S. that are going to an international medical school are going to the Caribbean. And I definitely think that while some Caribbean schools are better than others, I don't think that it's the first option for many students. Now, when you get outside of that, when you're talking about more mainstream institutions like the one you mentioned in Ireland, there's several in Europe as well as in Australia, where they have good, strong connections with the U.S. It depends a little bit on kind of what your goals are relative to residency and practice of medicine. I think that if you really see yourself in the U.S. and see yourself practicing medicine in the U.S., I think it's better to do medical school in the U.S. and do sort of the typical pathway. If you see your career as more of a global career and as more of, and you really see yourself maybe outside of the United States, or having a bigger picture to it all, then I think that obviously U.S. schools have great reputations internationally in terms of medicine, but foreign medical schools like Ireland are a good choice. And I think most of the time students really allow their passions to direct them, if that's the case, in terms of where they might want to stake their claim in terms of their career. So I would definitely encourage you to look at those schools and find schools again where, just like you're doing in the U.S., where they have a elements of their curriculum that really addresses need areas that you're interested in, and go for it. Absolutely. And
Awesome.
yeah, I wouldn't back off of that at all. No, not at all. Well,
Okay, cool.
Camille, everything, my perspective on your application, just to kind of go back to our beginning point at the dashboard and all, is that, I think you have you're going to have a great application coming this year. Definitely encourage you. I think you're ready to apply. I think you've got a good plan in place for the MCAT to take that. You've got a good variety of hours in terms of your activities and stuff, and but more so than anything, what really impresses me with your application is the centeredness on what it is that interests you, and the global health perspective that you're going to bring to the medical school that you enroll out is going to be amazing. And so I encourage you. I think you've got a good thing going. I do think, what I would encourage you to do on the medical schools is just maybe group them. Top group, definitely schools I'm going to apply to. These are my top choice for whatever reason. Middle group, these are the schools that maybe there's other things about them that I am attracted to. Maybe they don't have quite the concentration on public health that the others do, but definitely schools that I'm strongly considering. Maybe a bottom group that where you would say, well, if funds are available, if finances are a big deal for most students when it comes to applying to medical school, and the more you apply to, the more expensive it gets, both with the primary application as well as those secondary application fees that often come up. So and because this is often a very difficult thing for students to decide is where am I going to apply and how many schools is appropriate, or am I doing too many? I think the average these days is somewhere around 17 or 18 medical schools that applicants apply to. Dr. Gray and I were discussing this recently. He had a student last year that applied to 50 schools.
Oh my
50,
God.
50 schools. I mean, talking about a full-time
Wow.
job,
Oh my
just
God,
filling
yeah.
out all the application
Doing
stuff.
all the essays, yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's just insane. And
Wow.
I can't
Did it
remember
work
if
out?
well, I don't remember. So hopefully it did, but I just don't remember. But that's buck right there. That's a lot of money that
Yeah.
you're shelling
Uh-huh.
out, and a lot of time, effort on essays and stuff like that. So, but getting back to you, I'm encouraged by everything I've seen, Camille. Everything looks great. I would say keep up the good work. My guess is that you're going to be a very attractive candidate to a lot of these medical schools, and obviously the MCAT's going to, at this point you really it's a blank slate for you. You haven't taken a diagnostic yet. You really don't know where things are, but don't be discouraged when you first begin into the efforts of the MCAT. A diagnostic exam is the first ones that students take are often, not a great score. And so don't let that sidetrack you or
I've been avoiding it a little bit.
yeah, yeah. Don't let that depress you. This is, set your mind just as you have done to pretty much everything else that you've shown us today. It seems like you're methodical. You think these things out well, and just be methodical in terms of the MCAT prep, and let it direct itself. And I think you'll, the score will be whatever the score is, but set your sights high, and study hard and prepare well for it, and then that will also be a little bit that's going to direct you in terms of where you're going to apply for medical school. But I encourage you to apply very broadly, and I think you got a good chance at a great career ahead of you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Wright. I really
Well, of
appreciate you taking
course.
the time. This was really a lot of
Yeah.
fun. Thank you.